What if I told you there's a city at the bottom of the sea that was swallowed overnight, and Indian Navy divers have been finding its streets since 2001? Or that a single stone pillar has been standing in open air for over 1,600 years without rusting, and modern metallurgists still can't fully explain the alloy it's made from? Or that an entire mountain range contains underground chambers so geometrically precise that the Archaeological Survey of India sealed the access points and classified its own survey report. And at the very end, a reservoir in the Rajasthan desert that shouldn't hold water at all, except it does. And beneath it, sonar has picked up something that looks unmistakably like a city grid. 5 places, 5 stories, 0 comfortable explanations. The most important one, last. India is not just old, it is inconveniently old. The kind of old that makes established timelines nervous. Civilizations rose and fell here before most of the world had figured out agriculture. Written language appeared here in forms we still haven't fully decoded. Mathematics that Europe wouldn't discover for another 1,000 years was already being used in temples that no longer exist. And yet, here is the strange part. The deeper archaeology goes, the more it finds things that don't fit. Not things that are merely old, things that are wrong by the accepted model. Structures that imply technology we haven't accounted for. Locations that were known in oral tradition for centuries before instruments confirmed them. Objects that analysis dates to periods when, according to the textbooks, nobody was doing anything that sophisticated. Every few years, a new excavation forces a quiet rewrite. Not a public one. Academic papers get amended, site access gets restricted, a press conference gets canceled. The information exists. It simply doesn't travel far. In 2022, a geological team working near the Deccan Plateau submitted a report that contradicted the accepted timeline of early Indian urban settlement by approximately 3,000 years. The report is available, technically. Finding it takes effort. That effort is not accidental. What follows are 5 places that are either on the fringes of official acknowledgement, actively suppressed, or sitting in plain sight, while the questions they raise go deliberately unanswered. Each one tells part of a story. Together, they suggest something larger.
Number 1. The Iron Pillar of Delhi. Qutb Complex, New Delhi. A courtyard surrounded by 12th century ruins. In the center, a single iron pillar. 6.5 meters tall, 6 tons. Planted in the ground sometime in the 4th or 5th century, approximately 1,600 years ago. It has never rusted. This is not a metaphor or a legend. It is a documented metallurgical fact. The pillar stands fully exposed to the elements, rain, heat, humidity, in a city that receives a monsoon season every year without fail. Iron in these conditions doesn't last decades without treatment. This pillar has lasted 16 centuries without any treatment at all, and its surface shows only minimal oxidation on the underground portion, where moisture is most concentrated. The exposed shaft, the part that should have deteriorated fastest, is the part in best condition. Scientists first analyzed the pillar seriously in the 1960s. What they found was unexpected. The iron used has an unusual composition. A high phosphorus content, combined with the absence of sulfur and manganese, which are the elements that accelerate rust in standard iron. The crystalline microstructure of the metal is also atypical, suggesting a forging process that modern analysts describe as unlikely to have been achievable with conventional ancient technology. A study published by the Indian Institute of Technology Kanpur in 2002 went further. They identified a thin layer of crystalline iron hydrogen phosphate hydrate, a compound called misawite, coating the surface. This compound forms a passive barrier that prevents further oxidation. The unusual part: misawite doesn't form naturally on iron of this composition under normal conditions. It requires a specific combination of forge welding technique, slag composition, and surface treatment that the researchers could replicate in laboratory conditions, but only when they already knew what they were looking for. The question is, who knew this in the year 375, and how?
The pillar bears a Sanskrit inscription attributing it to a king named Chandra, almost certainly Chandragupta, the second of the Gupta dynasty. The inscription describes military campaigns and a monument erected as a standard to the god Vishnu. It says nothing about metallurgy. The Gupta period is acknowledged as a golden age of Indian science. Astronomers of this era calculated the length of the solar year to within minutes of the figure accepted today. Mathematicians introduced the concept of zero. Surgeons performed procedures that Europe would not attempt for another 1,000 years. All of this is on record. What is not on record, what nobody has adequately explained, is where the knowledge to forge this pillar came from. The technique required is not a small refinement of standard ironworking. It is a categorically different approach. No other object from this period demonstrates comparable metallurgy. No comparable pillar exists anywhere else in the world from any ancient civilization. In 1997, a researcher at the National Metallurgical Laboratory in Jamshedpur attempted to reverse engineer the forging process using only materials and tools plausibly available in the 4th century. The attempt produced iron of significantly different composition. When he published his methodology, a peer reviewer noted that even accounting for variation in raw materials, the process he described could not account for the phosphorus distribution pattern found in the original. The gap has not been explained. The pillar stands in the courtyard. Tourists photograph it every day. A fence now surrounds it because, until 1997, tradition held that if you could stand with your back to it and wrap your arms around it, your wish would be granted. The fence was installed after the surface began showing fingerprint impressions from decades of contact. The rust didn't get it. Human hands were a more immediate concern.
Number 2. Dwarka, the submerged city. Western coast of India, the Arabian Sea, just off the coast of Gujarat. Depth between 30 and 40 feet. What's down there has been known to fishermen for generations. The city of Dwarka appears in the Mahabharata, that's Mahabharata, one of the 2 great Sanskrit epics, traditionally dated to somewhere between 400 BC and 400 AD, though the events it describes are placed in an era far earlier. In the text, Dwarka is the kingdom of Krishna. It is described as a magnificent city of 7 islands, connected by bridges, with towers and gates and a harbor that could accommodate thousands of ships. And then, the text says, the sea swallowed it. 7 days after Krishna's death, the city simply went under. For centuries, this was classified as mythology. Then, in 1983, the Archaeological Survey of India's Marine Archaeology Unit began systematic exploration of the seabed near modern Dwarka, a city that still exists, still bears the same name, and is considered one of the 7 sacred cities of Hinduism. What they found required multiple expeditions to properly document. Stone walls, a grid of streets, building foundations arranged in patterns consistent with planned urban construction. Stone anchors, a large stone structure with a regular geometric shape that the excavation team described as a massive fortification or civic building. The structures are not from any period that fits the Mahabharata's mythological timeline. Thermoluminescence dating of material recovered from the site places construction at approximately 1500 BC. Some samples tested older. The civilization that built what is underwater at Dwarka was building it while the Indus Valley cities of Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro were still standing. Then, in 2000, and again in 2001, the National Institute of Ocean Technology, while conducting pollution surveys in the Gulf of Khambat, about 150 kilometers north of Dwarka, detected something unexpected on sonar: a submerged plateau. On it, geometric anomalies consistent with man-made structures. Divers were sent down. They recovered artifacts: wood fragments, pottery, human teeth. The wood was carbon dated. The result? Approximately 9,500 years old. That date places the site at the end of the last ice age, the period when sea levels worldwide were rising as glaciers melted. If the structures are genuinely 9,500 years old, the civilization that built them predates the earliest accepted date for organized urban civilization anywhere on Earth by roughly 5,000 years. The announcement was made by the Indian government.
It generated significant press coverage for about 2 weeks. Then something happened, or rather, didn't happen. No major international archaeological expedition was organized. No UNESCO designation was applied for. No peer-reviewed excavation report appeared in any major journal. The Indian government did not invite external verification. The site remains, officially, under study. In 2023, a professor of ancient history at a European university, who had formally requested access to the full survey data from the 2001 discovery, described the response she received in a public lecture as collegially worded non-cooperation. She received summary documents, the raw sonar data, the diver reports, the artifact catalog. None of it was made available. What we know: there is something under the Gulf of Combat. What it is, precisely when it was built, and what civilization built it, these questions are open. Functionally closed to independent investigation, but officially open. The sea keeps its secrets well. The institutions above it keep them better.
Number 3. The Jodhpur Sonic Boom. December 18, 1996. The city of Jodhpur, Rajasthan. 11:05 in the morning. A sound like a cannon fired directly overhead, a sharp concussive boom, was heard across the entire city simultaneously. Windows rattled. Residents flooded emergency lines. The noise was heard as far as 40 kilometers from the city center, with comparable intensity in all directions, suggesting the source was directly above Jodhpur, rather than approaching from one side. The Indian Air Force was contacted immediately. They confirmed that no aircraft, military or civilian, was in the vicinity at the time. No supersonic flight had been authorized. No exercise was underway. The Air Force's own investigation turned up no matching flight data from any source, domestic or foreign. A sonic boom, by definition, requires something moving faster than sound. The shockwave spreads outward from the object's path. But witness accounts from Jodhpur that day describe the sound as omnidirectional, equally loud in every part of the city, without the characteristic double crack of a passing aircraft. This is not how a standard sonic boom behaves. It is, however, consistent with an object directly above, stationary or moving vertically. The incident was reported in the Times of India, local Rajasthani newspapers, and briefly picked up by international wire services. No official explanation was ever issued. The Air Force stated that no aircraft was responsible. The meteorological department ruled out any weather-related cause. The sky was clear, conditions calm. Geological services confirmed no seismic activity. There was no explosion on the ground. There was no identifiable point of origin. What makes this more than a curiosity is what came next, or rather, what didn't. In most countries, an unexplained sonic boom over a major city triggers an investigation. Reports are published. Even if the conclusion is unknown cause, the process is documented. In this case, the investigation appears to have simply stopped. No government report was published. No press conference was held. The story faded. But here is what hasn't faded. The Jodhpur event has become one of the documented examples in a class of unexplained phenomena sometimes called skyquakes. Sounds of enormous intensity with no identifiable source, reported on every continent, throughout recorded history, and continuing into the present. Off the coast of Belgium in 1871. Along the Ganges Plain in the 19th century, described in British colonial reports as the Barisal Guns. The coast of North Carolina, the North Sea. In 2019, a team of atmospheric physicists published a paper attempting to model conditions under which natural atmospheric phenomena could produce a single sharp report similar to a sonic boom, with omnidirectional propagation. Their conclusion: such conditions are theoretically possible, but would require a highly unusual combination of atmospheric layering, temperature inversion, and pressure differential that has never been directly observed. Jodhpur, December 18, 1996. No aircraft, no explosion, no earthquake, no explanation. Just a sound that an entire city heard at exactly the same moment, that rattled their windows, that the government investigated, and then quietly stopped investigating. Number 4. Lonar Crater. Maharashtra. A crater in the Deccan Plateau, 1.8 kilometers in diameter, 52,000 years old, formed by a meteorite impact at an estimated speed of 90,000 kilometers per hour. The Lonar, that's Lonar, crater lake is unusual for several reasons. It is one of only 4 known impact craters in the world that formed in basaltic rock rather than sedimentary or granitic crust. The lake within it has a dual chemistry, an outer ring of fresh water and an inner section of highly alkaline saline water, separated by a visible boundary that researchers have been studying since the 1970s, without reaching consensus on what maintains it. But the deeper strangeness is this. Around the rim of the crater, there are temples, at least 14 of them, most dating to between the 6th and 12th centuries. They are arranged in a specific pattern around the circumference, with their orientations pointing inward toward the lake. Some also align with solstice and equinox positions. The question archaeologists have been reluctant to ask directly: why were medieval temple builders so specifically interested in this particular hole in the ground? The crater was not identified as a meteorite impact site until 1823 by a British officer named Alexander. Before that, official British records describe it simply as a lake of unusual character. The local population had a different understanding. Ancient texts, some of which predate the oldest temples at the site, describe the Lonar crater as a place where the sky met the earth and something was destroyed. The Skanda Purana, that's Skanda Purana, one of the 18 major Sanskrit texts, contains what some researchers interpret as a description of the impact event itself: a fire falling from the sky, the ground opening, a lake forming where there was none. The Skanda Purana's oldest manuscripts date to roughly the 7th or 8th century. The impact happened 52,000 years ago. If the text contains a record of the impact, the description would have been transmitted orally for approximately 50,000 years before being written down. This is not impossible. Indigenous oral traditions in other parts of the world have been verified as accurate accounts of geological events tens of thousands of years old. But it is exceptional. In 2010, a team from the Physical Research Laboratory in Ahmedabad conducted a detailed study of the lake's water chemistry and the magnetic anomalies around the crater rim. The study confirmed that the basalt beneath the crater had been magnetized in a pattern inconsistent with normal geological processes, a pattern consistent with the intense heat of an impact event. Expected, standard. What was not expected? The magnetization pattern showed a second anomaly, deeper, that did not correspond to the impact event. The researchers described it as a secondary magnetic signature of unclear origin at approximately 200 meters depth. They recommended further investigation. As of the last available publication, further investigation has not been published. There is also this, near the largest temple on the crater rim, the Daitya Sudan temple. That's Daitya Sudan, dedicated to Vishnu and believed by locals to mark the exact spot where the meteorite struck. There is a room that is locked. It has been locked for as long as anyone currently at the temple can remember. The key, according to the head priest interviewed in a 2017 documentary, belongs to a custodial lineage that was interrupted sometime in the 19th century. Nobody alive holds it. Nobody has tried to force the door, because nobody with authority to order it has asked. The room is roughly 3 meters by 3 meters, based on exterior measurements. What it contains, or whether anything remains inside, is unknown. Number 5, and this is the one you need to sit with. Tiruvananthapuram, Kerala, southern tip of India, the Padmanabha Swami Temple, dedicated to Vishnu in his cosmic sleep form, reclining on a serpent. Temple historians date the structure's current form to the 16th century, though inscriptions place a temple at this site as far back as the 8th. Managed by the royal family of Travancore, a dynasty whose territory once controlled one of the most strategically important spice trade ports in Asia. In 2011, the Supreme Court of India ordered an inventory of the temple's underground vaults following a legal petition. There were 6 vaults. The court ordered 5 to be opened. What came out of those 5 vaults has been called the single largest collection of treasure ever documented in one location in human history.
gold statues, jeweled thrones, crowns with gemstones of a size that gemologists said they had never encountered outside museum collections, bags of uncut diamonds, chains of gold so long it took 2 people to carry them, coins from every major trading civilization that touched India over 3,000 years, Roman, Arab, Chinese, Dutch, British. Sacred objects in pure gold, some larger than a human being. The inventory took months. The total estimated value, between 15 and 22 billion US dollars, depending on the methodology. Some private assessors put the figure higher. The Supreme Court authorized the opening of all 6 vaults. 5 were opened. Vault B was not. The door of Vault B is different from the others. It has no visible hinge mechanism on the exterior. It has no identifiable locking system on the outside. It is solid metal, estimated at several tons, with 2 serpents engraved on its face, life-size, facing each other. The Travancore royal family's records describe the vault as having been sealed during the reign of Maharaja Marthanda Varma in the mid-18th century, using a ritual called Naga Bandham, a Sanskrit term meaning approximately serpent binding, which according to the tradition can only be reversed by a priest trained in the Garuda mantram, a specific Sanskrit recitation associated with Garuda, the eagle deity and traditional enemy of serpents. The court was informed that no such priest is currently known to exist. Here is where the story becomes something other than mythology. In 2020, the Supreme Court of India took up the question of Vault B again, following renewed petitions. The court received testimony from historians, religious scholars, structural engineers, and representatives of the Travancore royal family. The final decision: the vault will not be opened. The court's written judgment used the phrase, "matters of religious and cultural sensitivity, requiring further deliberative process." This is a court with jurisdiction over nuclear installations and classified government programs. This is a court that, in other cases, has ordered the Indian government to disclose defense budgets. And it looked at a locked door in a temple basement and said, "Not yet." Why? Consider the logic of the vault's position. In the architecture of the Travancore treasury system, which is partially documented in both temple records and colonial-era British East India Company correspondence, the most critical assets were stored deepest and farthest from the entrance. Vault B is the deepest vault. It is the farthest from the main temple entrance. In the royal tradition of Travancore, which maintained sovereignty for longer than most Indian kingdoms, precisely because its rulers were extraordinarily cautious with their most valuable resources, the innermost chamber held the irreplaceable. A court commissioner appointed during the 2011 inventory stated in testimony, "If Vault A contained what it contained, one must apply the reasonable inference that Vault B was reserved for what could not be risked even in Vault A." The British East India Company's records from the 1840s contain an exchange of correspondence regarding the Padmanabhaswamy Temple. A company official requested access to the lower vaults of the temple complex. The Raja of Travancore refused. The company official's follow-up letter notes only that the refusal was absolute, and the Raja declined to discuss the matter. There is no record of what the company official believed was inside, or what the Raja told him, if anything. The relevant page in the company archive exists. The response, if there was a written one, does not. It may have been removed. It may never have been written. The archive simply has a gap where the answer should be. Structurally, Vault B lies below the water table. Ground-penetrating radar, used on the accessible area.
Here is what stays with me about all 5 of these places. You can go to them right now. Book a flight, hire a car, walk up to the iron pillar and put your hand on it. Stand at the edge of the Lonar crater and look down at the water. Take the ferry to the coast near Dwarka and look out at the sea above the city that shouldn't exist. Stand in the courtyard of the Padmanabhaswamy Temple and listen to the priests moving through their rituals on the other side of a wall, behind which is a door, behind which nobody alive is allowed to go. You can be 10 feet from these things, and the answers will still not be there. That is what makes this different from a conspiracy. Conspiracies require someone actively hiding something. What we have here is something quieter and stranger than that. We have institutions that looked directly at the evidence and decided that not knowing was preferable to finding out. Courts, governments, scientific bodies, temple administrations. Not hiding, just choosing to leave the door closed. Which means the question was never really about what is behind the door. The question is, what kind of answer would make an entire Supreme Court look at it and say, not yet. Whatever is in Vault B, whatever is under the Gulf of Kambat, whatever made that sound above Jodhpur on a clear December morning, it was considered, and it was left alone. That decision tells you more than any answer would. Write in the comments which of these 5 you think they are most afraid to open, and whether you think, if they ever do open it, we will actually be told what they find.